Hello, everyone. I'm Maria Grazia Maglione, President of TESOL Italy 2020-2022, and I'd like to welcome you to this session of the TESOL Italy 48th Convention. Certificate of attendance will be available to download from the convention page of the TESOL Italy website after the convention. Our speaker for this session is Marcus Siconolfi. Marcus is English Language Training Coordinator for ETS Global in Spain and Portugal. Based in Madrid, he has taught English to students of all ages and levels, focusing on business EAP-ESP in higher education, in addition to his extensive experience in the area of teacher training and development. The title of Marcus' session is Fostering Learner Empowerment, the Role of Self and Peer Assessment. Marcus, the floor is yours. Unmute the microphone, please, Marcus.
Oops. Okay, now can you hear me? Yes, can you hear me? Yes? Okay, great. Sorry, I think it got... Can everybody see my screen? Can you see the slide? Yes, foster learner. Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Grazie mille, Maria. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here today. And today we're going to look at, as Maria said, fostering learner empowerment, the role of self and peer assessment. Now, Maria already told you a little bit about me, so I won't bore you with any more details, but just so you know, some of you may be wondering, you look at that name, you're like, oh, Marcus Siconolfi, where's he from? Well, my full name is actually Marcus Giovanni Siconolfi Pontorno, ma io non sono italiano. I'm from New York, but my great-grandparents, all my great-grandparents were Italian. But I am now based in Madrid, where I have lived for the past 20 years or so, more or less. So it's a pleasure to be here today. And as Maria said, I'm the ELT coordinator for ETS Global. So you may or may not know that ETS is the company behind the tests such as the TOEFL and the TOEIC, and also the GRE, and a number of other assessment exams and assessments, both in English proficiency and also for other educational purposes. And it is also the largest the largest private research and assessment institution in the world. And because it has this background in research, all of ETS's assessments are highly rooted, deeply rooted, highly based in research. And we're going to look at some areas of research that point to the benefits of learner-oriented assessment and this integrated approach to using learner-oriented assessment for teaching and learning. And also we're going to look specifically at how to use rubrics and performance criteria for self and peer assessment in the EAP classroom. So specifically when looking at English for academic purposes and how we could use these rubrics, not just for the teachers, but also for students themselves to be able to take advantage of these rubrics and other tools that we have so that they can really use assessment, self-assessment and peer assessment to see and mark their own progress. Okay? And we're going to look at a couple of possible classroom activities with the main focus on writing today. And we're going to look at specifically the TOEFL IBT and some of the learning objectives, because these writing skills are very clearly expressed in the TOEFL IBT test. And then at the end, we'll have time for a little summary and Q&A. So let's just go right into it here. Now, as teachers, we often ask ourselves, right, is this really worth doing, right? Peer assessment, self-assessment. Do the students really get anything out of it? Well, I think they do. I think it really can be a very powerful tool. And I think that we're going to see some ways that we could use it today. the other question that teachers have is, okay, so how do I go about actually implementing self and peer assessment in my own classroom? And what tools can I use? And that's what we're going to look at now. So let me just see here. I can't see the chat, but I think, yes, everything's okay, right? Everybody is good? Yes. Everybody can hear and see perfectly? Okay, great. Thank you. I see you, Maria. Okay. So let's move on here. First, we'll talk a little bit about learner-oriented assessment. So we're going to look at self and peer assessment through the lens of learner-oriented assessment. So what do I mean by learner-oriented assessment? Well, really, learner-oriented assessment is this. It's the collection and interpretation of evidence about performance so that judgments can be made about further language development. And the idea is that we're harnessing the power of classroom assessment in order to foster effective and productive student learning. And we focus on increasing learning for all assessments, whether predominantly summative or formative. And that's a key aim to promote productive student learning. So let's just talk a little bit about summative and formative. You may or may not be familiar with these terms. So summative assessment, I guess, is what you would consider the classical type of assessment, right? The tests at the end of a period of study. So basically, you have the test at the end of the chapter or the end of the semester or the end of a unit, And they're generally linked directly to a syllabus or to some model, some theoretical model. And they're specifically designed with validity and reliability in mind. So a good summative assessment is designed with this in mind, right? The validity, the reliability. Is it really testing what we want it to be testing? Is it showing that the student is actually proficient in this? But it can often be perceived just as, grading, marking. Okay, we need to give them a test to give them a grade. We need to give them a test to show that they know this. And it could sometimes lead to this syndrome, let's say, of teaching to the test, right? So we know the students have to pass this test, so we're going to teach just for that test. But maybe in the process, we lose some of those actual opportunities to really learn the language, right? English isn't just about passing a test, for example. English or any language is about being able to use the language effectively, appropriately, in a variety of circumstances, not just on test day, right? So, in contrast, we have formative assessment. And formative assessment is something that can be used more during the period of study. So not the test at the end, but during the period of study. And it tends to respond more to the evolving needs and developments, milestones of the learner. And it tends to emphasize more interaction, support, and development. And sometimes it's not seen as reliable or as valid because it's more based on the teacher's intuition, the teacher's perception of how the students are doing, and maybe the areas that they need to focus on more or ways to kind of guide them. So each one has their pros, their cons, their not so much pros and cons, but more slightly different focus. So formative assessment and summative assessment, they have their different focuses. But the good thing about learner-oriented assessment is that we can actually cover both of these. We can use learner-oriented assessment and really help to focus on both summative and formative assessment by focusing on what the learner really is able to do and what we expect them to do. And we're going to look a little bit now more at the self-peer assessment framework within learner-oriented assessment. Okay? So this is kind of a little bit of a complicated diagram here. But it's basically, you can see here, that learner-oriented assessment is defined as this kind of, let's say, reconciliation of the certification and the learning. So we have this, okay, we try to certify the purpose and we try to measure the learning for that purpose. So it's constructed based on three major principles, and its implementation is jointly shaped by both the tutors and by the teacher, the tutor, and the student's understanding and experience. So the first principle of learner-oriented assessment is its formative aspect, so that assessment should be incorporated as a regular part of learning tasks across a period of study rather than a short-term evaluation of learning outcomes at the end of a module, a unit, etc. So in this way, assessment tasks are associated with problem solving, collaboration, and authenticity, which really reflect this real-world application of the subject matter. The second principle of the student involvement is more about the learner's engagement with the assessment criteria and the quality of the learning outcome, as well as evaluation practices performed by themselves or with peer learners. So through these activities, learners are expected to understand how assessment criteria are constructed and how assessment works and what's expected in this assessment. And in this way, self-assessment and peer assessment really helps the learners to situate themselves, to kind of know where they are in relation to the goals, the final learning goals, and appropriately adjust their understanding as they pursue these goals. And it also helps to foster, peer assessment also helps to foster collaborative skills, right? It looks at learning as a collaborative activity, and it echoes the social constructivist view that knowledge is collaboratively gained and employed. Okay, so it's not just done in isolation, which is really why we learn languages, right? We don't learn languages just to speak to ourselves. Maybe we do. Sometimes we like to speak to ourselves in another language in the mirror, but generally we like to interact with other people. And then with regard to feedback, it's noted that students, they don't just need feedback just to get feedback and to get a grade, but it's more about what they can do with that feedback that matters. And that feedback, if you just give them a grade without any sort of response or correlation to what they've been doing, it doesn't really help, right? It doesn't really help them to grow. So students tend to disregard assessment feedback because it's not really telling them anything about their actual learning. However, in doing formative assessment and collaborative assessment, it really helps to kind of close this loop where they actually get feedback, but they can apply it in the moment and see where they're strong, where they're weaker, and how they can use that to grow. Okay, sorry, I forgot to click on there. So again, just the core attributes really quick. So we said principle one was the assessment tasks really should be designed to stimulate learning practices among students. Okay, that's the idea here, is that we don't just want to assess just to assess. We don't want to give them tests just for the sake of giving tests. Really want to help stimulate deep learning among the students. Okay. The second principle is that assessments should involve the students actively engaging with the criteria. So evaluation of their own and their peers' performance and the application of the assessment criteria really helps them to understand better why and how to use it. And the last principle here, provide forward-looking feedback conducive to student learning. So really the feedback should be timely, right? We don't just giving them a test at the end of the semester, at the end of the unit. Okay, great. They do the test and then they're done. They go to summer they go on summer holiday. But really, if it's timed at regular intervals throughout the course of a class, throughout the course of a semester or whatever learning period, it really helps to guide them along the way and to help them look forward to that final assessment, which, yes, they will probably have to do, right, at the end of the course. All right, so now we're going to look in a little more detail about how to actually use rubrics and other performance criteria in the English for Academic Purposes classroom. Okay. So, again, the question, right? How can I put, okay, this sounds great, right? It sounds very, lots of great ideas here, but how can you actually put it into practice, which is, in the end, what we all want to do? And of course, there are many ways to do this. Just to kind of give a very basic outline here, we're going to look a little bit at assessment for learning. So this is kind of another aspect of learner-oriented assessment, but assessment for learning can help students by posing several key questions here. And mainly they're divided into three groups of questions. We have the typical question, where am I going? Then where am I now? And how can I close the gap? Right? So just to break this down a little bit here, you can see that, where am I going? Okay, so you really want to see what is your end goal, right? What is your objective? And again, it doesn't have to be just to pass the test. It shouldn't be just to pass the test. It should be to acquire a specific skill, a specific ability to do something in the language. So the clearer that we can be with these learning objectives and with these goals, the more it will help to guide our students about what they really need and hopefully want to accomplish. So again, provide clear, understandable vision of the learning target, and to use examples and models of strong and weak work, right? So we can look at work and say, okay, is this really meeting the goal that we set, or is it weaker than the goal? And that helps to give students an idea of where they are, right? If they see, okay, this is what's expected of me, this is strong work, or this is a good demonstration of that ability that I'm trying to achieve, that skill, that particular use of the language. This is strong, this is weak, okay? This leads us to, where am I now? Okay, where do I fall in this scale of strong work to weak work? So, again, this is where am I now assessment, but not just assessment, right? Summative assessment at the end, but formative assessment throughout the entire learning journey. So we want to offer regular descriptive feedback, right? Not just, okay, you got a 6 out of 10, great job. Well, what? What does that tell you? Nothing, you passed, okay. But we want to offer descriptive feedback. And we want to teach students to self-assess and to set their own goals. They can be mini goals, right? Mini goals that lead to that final goal. And then, of course, the last part, how can I close the gap, right? So this is where I need to be. This is where I am now. How do I close that gap? And again, this is where the teacher really comes in and designs lessons to focus on one aspect of quality at a time, to teach students focused revision, right? So we need to help to guide the students to improve. We can't just say, okay, this is what you need to improve, go improve. No, right? We need to actually teach them how to revise their work and look, okay, this is how we can improve this. This is how you can improve yourself and work on this outside of class. And also we need to engage students in self-reflection and to let them keep track and to share their learning as well. And you see this little circle here. We have the objective, the assessment, the activity, but it's not just one way. It's not, set the objective, do an activity, and then assess, or set the objective, assess, and then do an activity. They're all interchangeable in a way, or they can go back and forth to each other. Of course, you want to set some goals, then you can either assess those goals, do an activity. You can do an activity and then reassess. You can assess and then adjust the goals, maybe depending. You can raise or lower or adjust them, make them more or less specific. So really, in an ideal situation, we should think of this as a fluid cycle instead of goals, activities, assess, right? That's obviously in the real world, we're of course limited by syllabus, for a course, for for a specific educational purpose. Yes, they have to pass the test at the end of the semester, but ideally, the more we can make this a fluid circle of objectives, assessing activities, and then being able to evolve and design those as the student grows, the better it will be for everyone, for the student and for the teacher too. It might seem like it's more work, but really, if you're helping to adjust those goals, you're really getting to what the student actually needs and how it can help them to grow. All right, so we're going to look now at some sample tools for self and peer assessment. So of course you have checklists, right? Everybody has probably used some sort of checklist. Okay, does your text include this, etc.? This vocabulary, this grammar structure, boom, boom, boom. Rubrics, which we're going to look more at now, rubrics. Learning logs, right? You can keep a little journal, or like now you can use a forum, for example, like a discussion forum, Moodle or Google Classrooms or Teams or something like this to kind of keep maybe a class log or individual logs about what was covered and what we need to work on, etc. Portfolio of the student and their needs, and etc. But the idea is that we often only associate rubrics with teachers, right? Rubrics are something that teachers use to grade their students. But really, I think it's important for students to kind of get a bit more comfortable using rubrics themselves, and not only to understand how they work and what they're going to be assessed on, but also to really be able to leverage that knowledge to be able to improve and to be able to be a bit more autonomous. So here you have this kind of checklist, right? You have a simple checklist. Imagine you have to write about something you like, right? I think football is the best sport because it's fun, exciting, and great. The end. Yes, you ticked all the boxes there, right? You stated an opinion, boom. You supported your opinion because, okay, and you gave 3 reasons, boom, boom, boom. Well, according to a checklist, this is a perfect text, right? But in the real world, again, this probably wouldn't cut it. I mean, maybe if you're, yes, an A1 student, this would be, okay, yes, you fulfilled your goals, but really we want to get into a little bit more detail about what is expected here. And we can do that by using rubrics and some other tools as well to go into a little bit more detail about the kind of language, the quality of the language that we want the students to employ. Okay. Great. So we're going to look now at this sample activity here. And this is kind of an opportunity for self and peer assessment. And imagine this is an A2 writing task here. So we have a homework assignment, and we're going to rate it on a scale of 1 to 5. So for a 5, the top score, we would want the students to be able to perform the following. So the students receive an email survey from a travel agent asking what's the best vacation destination. Students should write a response to the email and follow these guidelines. Express an opinion using more than just the I think vocabulary that you learned as beginners. Support the opinion using more variety than just because, which you learned at beginners. And use more than just one reason to example and to support your opinion. Okay, so as you can see here, the rubric helps to give the students a little bit of a better idea of what's really expected of them and the kind and the quality of the language that they should use in their response. Okay. And here we have the actual assignment. So this is the example of the travel agent letter, blah, blah, blah. And then this could be a way to actually go beyond the checklist and to look at it in another way, another thing they can do. So, for example, they can first start in small groups, and they can distribute samples of writing on this topic, maybe from the previous class, the previous year, if the teacher has those, of course, with their permission and GDPR and all that. But then they can ask the students to compare them. Why is one writing sample stronger or weaker than the others? So ideally, they should have a range of samples from very strong to very weak. And then we could have the students sort those samples into different buckets, okay? Different categories. So, for example, we have a strong bucket, an okay bucket, and a needs work bucket, for example. And let's look at some actual examples. So this would be student sample 1. So here we say, Dear Sue, I prefer many vacation places, but to make the very hard choice, just one, and I tell you, it's France. It's for the art. Of the cities I choose, Nice. It has mostly museums, including Matisse, Chagall, Renoir. For Renoir, we see the Garden of Him, and won't that be inspire? Sincerely, Jim. Okay? Then we have student sample 2. Dear Sue, I like England. I like shopping there. It has fun cities and museums. Bye. Tom. And then we have student sample 3. Dear Sue, if you ask me, it is to travel to where I can experience new sights, cultures, and food. That must be Thailand, to greeting with the famous Thai hospitality and the very spicy food I love. But Japan also has a very good food name of Wagyu, which is something we can eat rather that vacation travel place. Best regards, Mary. Okay, so what you would then do is you would actually take these samples and more, obviously you would have more samples of each level and get the students to read through them and actually sort them into a strong, okay, and needs work. Okay, and then you could, of course, go back to the rubric and see why, right? Why does this one need work? What is it missing? Okay, well, it gives kind of a very basic language use, right? It doesn't really support the examples with good good examples. It doesn't give good examples to support their opinion, etc., etc. Okay. And so now we're going to look specifically at the actual writing rubrics for the TOEFL IBT test. So as you probably know, the TOEFL IBT is a test based on academic English. It's used for university acceptance, visa requirements, and it has the writing and the speaking are graded using rubrics. So there are independent raters who have rubrics, which are all available free and online. You can see here the link. Later I'll try and paste it in the chat. I don't want to do it now because I'm afraid I might mess something up and cause the presentation to stop. But later I'll try to post the link in the chat. If not, afterwards we can send it. But you can find the rubrics for the speaking and the writing of the TOEFL online for that you can feel free to use if you want. And this is just an example. These are the learning objectives that are being assessed. And then we have the integrated writing rubric and the writing for an academic discussion rubric. So these are the two tasks on the TOEFL IBT test. The first task, the integrated writing task, is a task that is it uses integrated skills, right? So the the test taker has to read a passage, then listen to a lecture about the same material, but usually from a different perspective, and then they have to combine that information in order to produce a response. So they have to compare and contrast what they read, what they listened to, and then produce a response, the integrated task. And then we have the writing for an academic discussion task, which is a shorter task. It's an opinion task in short form. So it's based on a 100-word, approximately 10 minutes, 100-word contribution to an online discussion forum. So this is the newest of the TOEFL IBT tasks. It was released this past July with the new modernized version of the test, and it's trying to kind of reflect and capture the relevance of online discussion forums in classrooms. So the teacher posts a topic, and then there are some example student responses, and then the student has to make their own contribution to the task of approximately 100 words. And so they each have different rubrics, obviously, because the requirements for each task are different, and the expectations are different. So we're just going to give you an example of, imagine you were preparing something for a B1 plus class. Let's call it intermediate level, B1, B1 plus. And basically here you have, you're going to focus on writing, intermediate, learning objections. Students will be able to express opinions. Okay, that's kind of basic. But then we want to get them from that B1 to B1 plus. We want the students to be able to support the opinions with multiple well-elaborated reasons. Okay, so we're kind of letting students what they need to know. We're letting students know what they need to do in order to move from kind of basic to a bit more advanced. And with vocabulary, for example, I think, because, I like, because, okay? But we want them to move also to show that my personal view is because, in my opinion, for example. So we actually give them examples of the type of language that's expected of them in the task. And again, if students are struggling to find language for analyzing the examples, this is the actual rubric here. So this is the actual rubric for the writing for an academic discussion test. So this is, again, maybe this one is a little bit too complex for students, but we can obviously, as teachers, use this and then adapt this rubric. So here in the full official version, we have here a fully successful response. The response is relevant and very clearly expressed contribution to the online discussion. It demonstrates consistent facility in the use of language. A typical response displays the following: relevant and well-elaborated explanations, exemplifications, and/or details, effective use of a variety of syntactic structures and precise idiomatic word choice, almost no lexical or grammatical errors other than those expected from a competent writer writing under time conditions, etc., etc. So again, this is what the actual scorers, the actual raters of the exam would use, and as teachers, it's something that we can use as well. But for students, we might want to simplify it a bit. So, for example, we look at the relevant, well-elaborated exemplifications and/or details. We can try to simplify this language a bit. And for the students, we can give them a rubric with a question, right? So instead of saying relevant, well-elaborated, okay, for the student, we say, does my writing answer the question with strong, detailed arguments? Okay, so does it answer the question, right? Is it relevant? Does it answer the question? And does it give strong, detailed arguments, right? Which imply explanation, exemplifications, etc. Okay. So if we want to look at an example actual writing task, we can look at this task, the writing for an academic discussion. And again, you can think about what learning objectives could you use in your class, and how could students use rubrics to carry out self or peer assessment. So here we have the actual task, just to give you an idea. So here we have the instructions. Your professor is teaching a class on business. Write a post responding to the students' to the professor's question. In your response, you should express and support your personal opinion, make a contribution. An effective response will contain 100 words. Okay, so here we have the teacher. The teacher posts the topic. We're all exposed to a lot of advertising, especially on the internet. And of course, businesses spend a lot of money to create and distribute advertising. Before next class, I would like for you to discuss this question. Is advertising just a way of manipulating people to buy things they do not need? Or is it an important source of information that helps people make informed consumer decisions? And then you have examples of other students contributing to the discussion, and then your student would contribute to the discussion. So here's an example, a sample response. I think whether advertising is valuable or not depends on the degree of customization and personalization. If big data and other new advanced technologies can really help us to receive the ads we really want, I think in this way, ads will be beneficial. For example, if you are a female college student who likes K-pop, then while you're browsing the websites, some ads about BTS concerts pop up. You may not feel that unhappy. Instead, you may choose to click the ads and buy the concert tickets. However, if a sea of ads about football show up, you may feel angry and see them with no value. So this is an example of a student response. And this would be the rubric that would be used. So we saw before, this would be a level 5. Then you could look at level 4, a generally successful response. I know we're running low on time, right, Maria? I'm going to finish up soon. I know. Yeah, I see. All right. So this would be the official rater response. It would be classified as generally successful, right? The response is successful, not the top score, a 5, but a 4. Generally successful response includes a few sporadic language errors, but the examples are relevant and elaborated, and the post successfully uses some idiomatic language indicative of higher proficiency level, for example, of sea of ads. The response is generally appropriate to the task. But again, we could adapt this, right? And we could use here's a hybrid rubric checklist, right? So in order to get the top score of a 5, we have to say, okay, relevant to the topic, yes. Clearly expressed, yes. Supported with details, examples. Wide range of grammar and vocabulary, very few errors, right? So again, you can talk about with your students about what these actually mean, okay? And use them and have them use it for themselves and for their peers, right? They can, of course, exchange papers and try to assess each other using this. All right, so just to sum up, again, we have the 3 core elements of learner-oriented assessment, self and peer assessment tasks, which promote the kind of learning which is sought, involvement of students in the assessment process, as exemplified by the development of evaluative skills, and feedback, which feeds forward by prompting student engagement and action. And again, another potential strength of learner-oriented assessment, it can be applied in both formative and summative tasks. And particularly for summative tasks, learner-oriented assessment is designed in terms of assessment tasks as learning tasks. All right, and again, there's a bibliography here with all the research behind this, which you can share. And we also have a lot of additional resources. I would encourage you, if you have a chance, to sign up for our English language teaching community. There's a QR code there. You can you can scan, and you can sign up. I promise we won't spam you. You won't receive a million emails. We do send out like a monthly newsletter, and we do have monthly free webinars. Again, not just for the TOEFL or other ETS tests, but for teacher ELT development in general. We have a lot of teaching for academic purposes and webinars related to syllabus design, to other important topics. So if you would like to sign up for our English language teaching community, that would be great to have you join the community and just to stay abreast of all the free teacher development workshops that we do. Again, specifically for the TOEFL IBT, we also have a ton of free test prep on our website. If you go to the website, ets.org, TOEFL, you can I especially love the last one here, the new TOEFL Go web app. So if you go onto the website, there's a specific web interface called TOEFL Go, and it actually provides free AI scored assessment of productive tasks. So not only can you practice reading and listening, multiple choice questions, but actually productive tasks. You can actually do a writing exercise or a speaking exercise, send it to the system, and the system will give you very quick, detailed feedback, not only about the score that you would receive on the test, but also about how to improve your writing or your speaking. So this was just released this past July, and it really, I think, uses AI in a very cool way to give actual detailed feedback to students about their productive skills as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Marcus, for your great presentation, full of suggestions and the great potential of peer assessment, self and peer assessment. On behalf of TESOL Italy, so I would like to thank you again and all the participants for taking part in this session. A certificate of attendance will be available to download from the convention page of the TESOL Italy website after the convention. The next session, the next plenary session will be at 10 o'clock. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of the convention.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's a pleasure. Thank you.